we're ready.
We are recording.
Okay, welcome. Anybody like to second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. All in favor of approving tonight's agenda? Say aye or raise your hand so Misty knows.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, great. The next thing that is in this part of our meeting is that we have to make an adjustment to our scheduled April meeting because there is now a board meeting that evening. So obviously we can't meet that evening. The proposed shift date is moving from our original date of April 11th to April 17th, which is a Monday. And I believe I need to entertain a motion for that change as well. So where we are in the agenda, folks, is that we have to change our April meeting from the original scheduled date of April 11th into a proposed date of April 17th, and that is because there is a board meeting on the evening of April 11th, or afternoon, I should say, of April 11th. Go ahead, Dr.
Madam
Savage.
Chair, if I may just give some clarity. When the meeting schedule's done for the year, it's prior to the new year when they adopt the 2023 board schedule. So it doesn't always match up perfectly. It happens occasionally when you're during a transition like we did. So we had a whole new meeting schedule that came up and it didn't exist prior to when these meetings were done. So we're one of the committees that are impacted by it. There's not many, just because we meet on the off-week meetings. So that's the room availability was available for it, so we can maintain the same room as well. So it is available for the 17th, should the committee want. If they pick a different day that they would like, I would have to research the room availability if there are other options the committee would like for us to look at. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Savage, for the information. So, is there anybody that would like to make a motion to approve that date change? Thank you. A second?
I'll second.
Okay, and because this is Misty's first year with us, if you could just state your name when you make the motion, that would really help her out.
Christy Miller.
Mike Stamatopoulos.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. All in favor of changing our April meeting to the 17th? Aye. Anybody opposed? Abstain? Okay. So we have moved our April meeting till April 17th. So next on the agenda, Dr. Savage is going to give us an update on the superintendent's anticipated strategic plan refresh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just really pleasure to be here again tonight with everyone and excited for the update that I have. It's not a lot of detail, but one thing that I can say is we had been, since last time, we were looking at different consultants to help us with this anticipated strategic plan refresh. We're able to narrow that down and get to a final person, a firm with an individual selected in that firm to help us. Who's had a really strong track record of this work in Miami-Dade was one that more recently done. This was recommended to us through the Florida School Boards Association. But until we have all the final details and it's been gone through the process that we have internally, I don't want to give too much more than that other than to say, the styles along the board retreat type of approach, which is what they had done. But until we get to more details of the specific dates, we have dates tentatively set. In that work, and the next time I come, I'll have a much more robust handout with synopsis information, all of that. But until it's done and in the books, we're just not quite there yet. So very excited though that this work is moving forward, or at least that's our intention. I will just say it's exciting, especially to be a member of this committee, because when you're in this committee and your focus is a strategic plan, it's just really valuable time to provide some insight, and it happens to line up very much with the board timeline as well as our committee timeline. So one thing I will bring up later in the good of the order time period is just as I have already the two priorities of the committee we have scheduled for February and March, but I would just ask that as you think about today, as you hear the presentation today, there may be an opportunity in April to line this committee time, this topic up with this specific body of work. It's already aligned just by being part of the strategic plan, but just the insights, we could react to data that's being collected. There's just a lot of opportunities. So very excited to bring that update to you today. Madam Chair, if it's appropriate, I'd entertain any questions about anything I've said thus far.
Of course. Does anybody have any questions of Dr. Savage about the schedule for the update we're going to receive? All Perfect. Okay, let's keep moving. So tonight we're going to hear from the Executive Director of Human Resources, Rob Dodich. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I've heard.
Dodig, hard.
Thank you. I've only heard it 100 times.
Yeah, that's
I've
okay.
in my brain, Rob. Thank you.
Good Croatian name, so.
So this committee had identified one of our priority topics for the rest of this academic year as workforce success. So we are going to hear the Human Resources Strategic Objective and information.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for having me. I think we appeared a little over a year ago at this same committee, and talked then about recruiting. I will say it's quite ironic that Ken had those 5 minutes to talk about the refresh, because what I'm going to be talking about is our current strategic plan. So I inherited this strategic plan when Dr. Savage was interim superintendent and brought me on as the ED of HR in September of 2001. So I'll just say this, I did not contribute to some of these benchmarks. They were set before I came here. And again, you'll see why I'm saying that in a certain way. So just let me get started. Okay, too far. Sorry, guys. There we go. Okay, so I presented this to the board about a month ago, so I apologize, Mr. Fisher, you've already heard this. But it's exactly the same presentation that I gave the board, so all the statistics and things in here are the same. To begin, Human Resources supports the district's vision, mission, and core values by focusing on having the right talent in the right place. Our core competencies, as you see above, are building relationships, management by fact, continuous improvement and innovation, and risk minimization, which gives us strategic advantage that contributes to our mission through our focus on the single district priority of student success and the success factors of family and community engagement, workforce success, and continuous improvement. Our HR metrics are fairly significant, so today we're not going to, or tonight, I'm not going to overwhelm you with a bunch of statistics, but instead we're going to focus on some of our most important metrics to better understand the current state of the organization relative to both internal performance and our current labor conditions. This is not meant to be exhaustive, nor is it going to focus only on what we're good at or what we're doing well, but also going to focus on some opportunities for improvement. I like those phrases, but I'm an attorney, so I'll just say things we're not doing well. And from our strategic plan, we'll hopefully shed some light on this. And if you're interested in who came up with that, that was Dr. Savage's idea to put those pictures in there like that. Water then going through the system and then not being retained by the bathtub.
Mr. Dodig, it's important, when you've heard a hiring pipeline, that's where the water goes, goodness
The
gracious.
fact that it's not being retained is quite ironic, because we're having issues in that area, frankly. I'll just be honest with you. So here's the first bit of information. So we're coming off a record year in which we hired the most new school-based instructional staff ever. And that's on the right, all the way in the orange, 678 individuals. That's actually not in the orange, it's the blue line. So if you see 678 over there. But unfortunately, this graph also shows that it happens to be the year we also lost the most instructional staff, 929. So if you combine the orange and the gray above that. So basically, if you pay attention to the line graph and the top of the, what's that? Yes, sir, go ahead.
Questions?
I probably would take them at the end,
Okay.
but I think we can get
Ron,
by.
you're gonna send us this, you'll send us this presentation?
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that'd be
Yeah.
great.
So pay attention to the line, and then at the top of the bar for that year, for example, in fiscal year 20, which is right there in the middle, we experienced less of a negative impact because there was only a 134 position gap between the employees lost, whereas the most significant gap was in fiscal year 17. So we're currently narrowing the gap far better than we did in 17, but the bottom line is it's a steep curve to try to keep up with the trend of those leaving and those we're hiring. One thing I want to point out is terminations. When you hear that word, that usually suggests someone's been terminated, they've done something wrong. No, terminations for us are just people that have left the district. Okay, that's the term of art for terminations. It's not departures, it's not vacancies, it's everybody that's left. So I want to point that out because a lot of folks think, how did you terminate 900 people? We didn't. 900 people left the district. Do you want to take questions now? I don't know. I don't want you to lose your question, so go ahead and ask if it's about this slide. I'm fine with that.
No, that was,
Okay.
so these are 848, I would assume there's a small subset of that is termination.
Correct, yes.
Vast majority of that is voluntary.
Departures, yes, absolutely. Yep,
Include retirements?
yes,
Well,
yes.
81 is the retirement, 848
Yeah,
is just people walking away and saying thanks, but no.
yes. Yep, that's correct. And this is just instructional staff. Okay, so this isn't support staff, this isn't bus drivers or paraprofessionals, this is instructional staff, teachers essentially.
Do you do exit interviews to find out reasons for?
Yes, we try to do, and I could talk about that at the end, but our exit interview process is something that frankly needs to be improved upon, yes. And I don't think we're alone in that. That's hard information to gather sometimes from people. And their level of honesty or willingness to share while they're actually leaving. So although the charge to our recruitment folks is steep, this is a great slide because this data continues to improve year over year. Our benchmark for percentage of offers converted to hires is 75%, and we have exceeded that in the past 2 fiscal years. So we are hiring teachers at a considerable rate, those that we make offers to. And for instance, we have our annual job fair, recruitment fair on April 29th, and at that fair, we usually get at least 100 offers on the table to folks. So, and if we can get 75% of them in the classroom at the beginning of the next school year, that would be a fabulous result. The problem is the ones we're losing at the same time. So employee retention. As you're aware, teacher certification is a critical issue in Florida. Well, you may not be aware, certainly the school board is, but teacher certification is something that often if someone doesn't accomplish it in time in 3 years, we lose that employee because they can't pass the exams. So our school board has championed a legislative priority related to certification in the past to try to allow another avenue for someone to become certified, other than passing a test. And we haven't been that successful in the past, but I am hearing there's movement in that area because of the teacher shortage. I mean, nationwide. We're not alone in Florida, but there should be another pathway for folks to become a teacher without having to pass the test. So our percentage of teachers separating for failing to comply with credential requirements continues a 4-year trend of being below our benchmark of 3%. So we do a lot of things in staffing and talent management, which is a department that's under me. In that department, we develop individual plans with teachers who are struggling to get their credentialing. And our professional development department works in conjunction with them to provide classwork and training to attempt to improve a teacher's chance of passing the credentialing requirements. It seems crazy that we could actually lose teachers who have been in a classroom for 3 years because they can't be credentialed. So that's why that's one of our strategic plan goals. Employee retention. So this is the percentage of instructional personnel turnover by year. I have to first tell you, because the next slide is more explanatory, turnover for us in our system currently includes those that leave the district and those that transfer within the district, okay? So typically in an employment setting, if you're familiar with SHRM or any other agency that tracks turnover, it's usually just those that leave. But we also include transfers because it's difficult for a teacher sometimes to transfer from one school to another without having some things have to happen, training and other things, adjusting to a new culture. So we like people to stay where they are if they can, so that's why we track turnover in this way. As you can see, our number has increased greatly in the post-COVID era. Fiscal year 20 was COVID, and if you know anything about the workforce, people were not going anywhere. They just were staying where they were because they didn't know what was going to happen. So post-COVID, when people started feeling better about their situations, they've obviously either left to the tune of 29% or transferred to a different location. The next slide really kind of tells the story, which is transfers out are in orange, terminations are in blue. So the transfers out are 11.7% for fiscal year 22, and the terminations are 17.1%. So they've been fairly similar the last 2 years, other than that COVID year, where we've had basically 11.7% of our instructional staff turnover, which is high, yes.
Could you just offer just one typical example of what a transfer out would be, what that means?
Someone that left the district. It's just a term of art. Oh, transfer out of the location back, and someone transfers from Cape Coral High School to Ida Baker High School. Yeah, sorry.
Between schools.
They're a math
Yeah,
teacher.
it's just a term of art.
They go to being a math teacher at Dunbar.
Correct, so they would be counted, yes. But that's what I was trying to express, there is a cost to us in some ways, because that could possibly have created a vacancy now at Cape Coral High, and there could also be some other things culturally in the school or otherwise that teacher now has to adjust to in a new place of employment. We're basically a huge employer with 100 different sites. And all of the workplaces are different, frankly. I mean, we would like for them all to be the same, but that's a very difficult thing to do with different leadership and people.
Rob,
So,
can I give
yeah.
one more concrete example?
Absolutely.
Just to add to that example and a challenge that academically. So we have schools, say out in Lehigh, that serve, a particularly challenging segment where, they're struggling. They're on the borderline between a D or F school potentially. And they struggle to get teachers. They go to a job fair and they may not get as many applicants. So a person may take a job who lives in Cape Coral as a brand new teacher. And they live in Cape Coral, but they're driving all the way out to Lehigh. So on one hand, they're helping us by working in a school that we desperately need them and their services. At the same time, they're wanting to get closer to home. So who can blame them for wanting to work, to live closer to their home? But when they are not there, now all of a sudden that school may have a more difficult time replacing it. So this does not impact the schools equally. Some schools, particularly schools sometimes that serve students with greater needs, they often struggle disproportionately with this challenge. And so while we always want our employees to get where they need to go so they can be well served, there is a need ultimately for students having stability and having consistency, and for school cultures to also develop. If an entire math department per se turns over, that has a huge impact on the continuity in that particular school. So I just want to give that example as a school-based leader too.
Thank you.
Rob,
Yes.
I do have a question.
Sure, sure.
I'm just wondering, somewhere in your presentation you'll have, and just tell me to be quiet if that's the case. I'm looking at the strategic plan on my phone, just teeny tiny.
Yeah.
I'm probably reading it right, but one of the KPIs is to decrease turnover for school-based instructional personnel, and then the target for 22 was 19%. Do you have a slide somewhere that's going to show us what the target was for some of these KPIs and what that?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, and I could tell you I did. And this presentation went through probably 6 incarnations till it got to the point where the superintendent and cabinet was satisfied with the data in it. So I probably do have an old slide with maybe that in it, but not in this
I was just
presentation.
thinking for this committee, who
Yeah.
was really focused on the strategic plan.
Sure.
That would be good information to have.
Yep, okay. So non-instructional personnel turnover. This is even obviously more significant. As a district, non-instructional staff includes all staff that are not teachers, administrators, office staff, paraprofessionals, food service workers, bus drivers, and there's of course other positions, custodians and others. This figure, just need to remind you, even though it's very high, 34.7%, includes both terminations and transfers. We do not have it currently broken down like we did for instructional staff as to the transfers versus the terminations. But as you can see, in fiscal year '22, last year, it's the highest it's been in the last 5 years, 6 years. So, which is not really any different than other workplaces. People are leaving hourly jobs for other hourly jobs. And I think we talked about it last year, the ability to go to work for Amazon or some other entity that pays hourly, an unskilled job, so to speak, or a job that you only need a high school diploma. We're not necessarily competitive salary-wise or pay-wise with certain industries, and we're struggling with that, just be frank. So we were just compelled to get our pay up for paraprofessionals and others to $15 an hour, which has been helpful. And we raised the base pay for a bus driver to $17.25 an hour, which makes us, I think we're now 6th in the state, 6th highest. So, but we're still short bus drivers, as you know. So it's just a struggle in the support staff area. So the only, yes?
Mind if I comment?
No, of course.
One of the things I was thinking back when you're talking about certification and teaching and
Yes.
structure, one of the things going on right now is, for example, that's an issue that we're trying to work on legislatively is social workers
Yep.
requiring the teacher certification. One of the things that we're hoping, at least from our talks up in Tallahassee, is that we can remove that obstacle for them, because these are people that are not having to teach or not in the classroom. So, and we don't want to lose good social workers because of that. So I just
Yes.
wanted to put that out there. That's one thing that hopefully will help a little bit with this.
Yeah, so I can kind of comment on that also. So social workers have to take a professional teacher's exam, essentially. And the profession is not really related to teaching, so that's what Mr. Fisher's talking about. So we're trying to get relief from that. In fact, last year, I think we lost 3 folks that couldn't pass that test, 3 social workers. So at a time we can't afford to lose them, really. So our last objective or goal under the strategic plan involves operational efficiency and effectiveness. And this one is not related to hiring at all. If you know, insurance and benefits, or may not know, insurance and benefits is a department in HR. So I oversee our insurance and benefits department, and some of you may know our director, Bonnie McFarland. She is leaving the district after 11 years. Next week is her last week with the district. Which is an absolutely, and I think Dr. Savage would concur, a huge loss to this school district. So if anybody knows an insurance person, there is a job advertised, but Bonnie is a huge loss. And some of this is a credit to her. So what you see on the slide, it depicts the cost of claims for the district versus the trend. Trend is the cost of medical claims used typically in the health insurance industry. As you can see, the district had its largest gap in fiscal year '21, and we continue to be considerably lower than the industry trend due to our successful efforts in claim mitigation and our very popular wellness program. We have a great wellness program in this district. I'm not an example of it. However, there are great programs here for people to keep themselves healthy, and that's been very helpful with our claims mitigation. So, moving on to the future. If you haven't heard, we, with our unions, in collaboration with our unions, recently increased our level of insurance and the board's great contribution to allow us to increase the amount of employer contribution to our health plan. So especially those individuals with dependents on our health plan will now be able to cover, we're giving them an additional $4,000 towards their insurance, and will be able to cover dependents much cheaper than in the past. I'll just give you a personal example. My daughter's in college. She has not been on my insurance in the district because it was so expensive. So I was paying almost $300 a month for her. I'm now putting her on our district insurance because it's only going to cost me $80 a month. So that's like a $300 pay raise for me because of the board's help with that and the union's cooperation. Centralized hiring pilot, there is, has been my desire since I came here, and even before I came, Dr. Pruitt also had a significant interest in centralizing our hiring. If you don't know, we currently have hiring basically site-based. So when a school wants to hire an English teacher, they basically call us, we put the ad in for them, they contact the applicants, they interview them, and they hire them and do all the paperwork, the I-9 and all of that, and send it down here. Centralized hiring would make that all come in-house. So the only thing the school would have to do is interview the person that they want to hire and tell us they're hiring them. And we would send 5 or 6 or however we determine how many applicants to them to interview. And take the school out of a lot of the interworkings of hiring someone. And everything would be done down at the district. So that has had fits and starts because of a couple of things, COVID and Ian. So we're now trying to gear up to move towards centralized hiring. It will probably be a 2-year project. Principals want it. They want to see some progress in that area. We have a lot of antiquated processes in my division. I came here in 2005 as an attorney in the district, and we're doing some things the same way now that we did then. And so a lot of those things need to be changed. We've started targeting recruiting efforts, meaning there are certain schools that have more openings than others, so we've done job fairs just for those schools. Similarly with departments, especially transportation and food service, they typically have the most openings, so we've done targeted recruiting efforts for them. We are in the process of talking about a new way of hiring guest teachers. Guest teachers are substitute teachers, for those that aren't familiar with that term. We're exploring possibly a management company to manage that process for us. We have a cultural exchange program. If any of you don't know, that's a program that we deal with J1 visas. We have teachers from other countries that are here. We have about 20 of them this year. We are looking to increase that with a company that we use that uses contacts the Department of State to get teachers here from other parts of the world. And then we're going to try to do some things that other industries have been doing for years. Like in this building, we have a number of positions that more than likely could telecommute or work from home. Work week, work day is always something that people talk about. Why don't we go to a 4-day work week, 10-hour days? These are things that keep people in their jobs. And we haven't, as a government agency, done a real good job of that over the years. We just kind of do things the way we've always done them, and that's not going to retain employees in this day and age. People are looking for intrinsic factors other than pay and benefits. They want to be able to, and you know, those great companies, those high-tech companies, Google, Apple, they started this stuff. And now we're behind the 8 ball, and in some ways are competing with them for certain positions like IT and IS and other positions. So we have to somehow get ourselves to a point where we can offer other things to employees other than pay and benefits. Daycare, we're exploring possibly having daycare for our employees, young children, obviously before school age. It's not something we've been able to do in the past. So there's other things that are out there too that I don't have up here, but we're kind of open to all ideas at this point. Yes?
Related to that last one, I actually would have thought I would have seen exploring best practices from other school districts outside of Florida.
Yeah, I mean,
In Florida.
outside of Florida, it's a good idea because honestly,
That would be the best.
yeah, it would be. We're I will tell you in a lot of things, and I can say this as a former lawyer here too. We've been ahead of the curve on a lot of things in Florida sometimes. So you'd be surprised. You think other districts are doing certain things and they're not. And we've always had a school board and superintendents, at least since I've been here since 2005, that have been very progressive in a lot of ways. But really in the last 3, 4, 5 years, we've, I think, not stayed ahead of the game relative to the Great Resignation, if all of you know what that is, when all of a sudden everybody just started leaving their jobs. And we were stuck flat-footed, like, what do we need to do to keep people? Because people weren't even explaining while they're leaving. I'm just out of here. And We still have some of that, but I read a great article this morning, and it says, is the great regret an opportunity for a great return? So evidently, according to a recent survey, 70% of people that left during the Great Resignation regret leaving their jobs. So now there might be the great return. So I'm hopeful that a lot of people that left us want to come back. So it's just an interesting time, and it's a very difficult time to work in human resources, frankly, because people are just, I mean, I have several jobs advertised, including insurance and benefits director, and I have, as of yesterday, 0 applicants. So, and that's a well-paid job. So.
Do you guys have any outreach going on for the return employees? Do you guys do any callbacks?
It's a great
been
idea.
a year,
Yes,
been-
our recruitment department does. We are, a 6 or 7 person department, so they do a lot of job. They're actually going to Puerto Rico in the next couple of weeks to do teacher recruiting. So yes, and callbacks is another thing. You asked about exit interviews. That's another thing that we would like to do callbacks on exit interviews, like after 6 months, to see, will you now be honest with us why you left? And my department is not necessarily immune to it. I've lost 2 coordinators and a director in the 2 years I've been here. I mean, so, and people are going, believe it or not, to the county, to other places for, various reasons. So it's a highly competitive environment, and it's an employees market. So even for teachers. So we're doing our best. I hope all of these metrics improve, obviously. But I'm also interested in, and Dr. Savage touched on it, sort of modifying or changing some of them. I mean, I don't think they necessarily fit the current situation we're in employment-wise. So.
Can I mention one thing, Rob?
Yes.
Just like in your prior slide where you had, if you don't mind going back one slide?
Yep.
Like targeted recruiting. What I didn't see, but maybe you would want to elaborate if there's anything on the works in this, is like targeted retention. So while we know that we're trying to target specific schools and whatnot, if we find, any disturbing trends in that segment, because obviously when we're looking at things at the high level, when you see insurance and benefits, that is by and large an all-class effort. Like you mentioned the $300 raise, that's a type of raise that impacts every single employee that has that segment of, has children, has dependents, people that can benefit from that. It does initially help people who don't, but there was a raise in that piece as well. So those are whole class level things that help a lot of folks. Centralized hiring would help all the schools, but that targeted recruiting is very specific to particular schools where we have that need. Questioning on the retention side of that, do we have something in that you would want to share either?
Well, I can't tell you that I have a retention department. So I do have a recruiting department. But I will say, when Ken asked me to come on board as the ED of HR, I said to the board in the first meeting I appeared in front of them, for me, retention is more important than recruiting, because the people are already here. The key is to be able to keep them here. And I can tell you that I think the things we've done in collective bargaining the past 2 years, because we're a unionized environment, so I can't do anything necessarily outside of that, I think have been significant for teachers and support staff. Now, are they enough? Because of all the damage people may have had from the hurricane and no, they're not, frankly. And but I will say that I think there's enough there to retain people. For instance, we just agreed to a bonus structure for folks. If they're here at the end of March, they're going to get $2,400 in bonuses. So that's a significant amount of money for people, and that hopefully will retain them moving forward. So, but as you know, as a government agency, we receive funding from various sources, but we also are straddling that line of the amount of money we have, and currently, obviously, we've had some impact from the hurricane. So that has impacted collective bargaining this year. But we did the best we can, and the unions agreed, both unions agreed to what we offered and what the board could offer. So we're happy about that. We're hoping next year is a better year. I'm also hopeful that, just like this article says, that not necessarily people returning, but hopefully the faucet of people leaving turns off a little bit. Dr. Savage is right. What are we doing to try to retain people? Well, the best people for me to try to retain people and the best goodwill are our principals that run the schools. And if they're taking care of their people and they're helping the teachers and the support staff feel good about where they're working and all of those types of things, that's very important. And there's 100 different principals, so it's an interesting situation. Yeah.
Oh, I think everybody's gonna have, I saw that. One of the things that I'm thinking about as I'm listening to your presentation, Rob, obviously some of these KPIs are gonna change as the strategic plan evolves.
Yes.
But for example, there was a slide where you talked about historically the decreased turnover for school personnel. That was one of the KPIs for the
Right.
workforce success. Looked like the target for 22 was 19.
Yep.
And then the actual was 29.
Yes.
So one of the ways I think this committee could be helpful going forward is if we see those two numbers, the target and the actual, and then have a conversation about what were the strategies that you used.
Sure.
And talk about maybe some ideas for other strategies that
Yes.
might help you reach a target,
Yes.
target. That I think would help us stay focused on the KPIs. I know those could change as we're
Sure.
moving forward.
I just wanted to make a statement. I wanted to back up what Mike said about best practices. I mean, that works. And I think we need to look at that. I think we need to measure ourselves against what other schools are doing. The state college systems around the country do that. They put out a publication. I know I'm a graduate of a state college, Kutztown State University. In fact, I just had a meeting with them down here. They love coming down to Florida in the winter.
Of course they do.
And we just met last week, and their enrollment was well below 17% drop the last 5 years. And they had to come to decide what they wanted to do because their foundation, which is
Right.
$48 million, they couldn't get donors because people were saying, well, you guys are going to merge or go out of business. We're not going to give you money.
Yeah.
So they had to fall back and regroup and come up with a different strategy of recruiting outside the immediate area of Reading, Philadelphia, Allentown area. And it looks like what they reported at lunch the other day, it looks like they've got a handle on that.
Good.
But we need to take a look at best practices. I think Mike's exactly right. I don't care what state it is. There's got to be a school system out there that's really turned this thing around. And let's go take a look and see how the heck they did it.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And I don't want to put Mr. Fisher on the spot, but part of the reason I brought up the retention piece was strictly to talk about that while we have Rob, Mr. Dodig here in front of us, the reality is retention is an entire district engagement. It is everything. And schools are obviously the franchises that run, they manage, they hire, they support, they create the cultures. Those schools are our basic unit, but there's a lot of other ones. As we mentioned, transportation, we have cafeteria food services. There are so many different components to it. And so the reason why I brought that specific piece is because the retention side of this, there's a lot that can be learned, not just from systems and what they're doing, but also what the individual schools do. One of the things that Mr. Fisher brought up in the board, the presentation that we had on this particular area, and if you're Mr. Fisher, are willing to add more to this, but they actually at their conference with the school board members, they heard from a principal who had basically no turnover whatsoever and shared some of that success. I mean, do you mind sharing just for this group?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Savage. It actually kind of goes to what Mr. Ribble was talking about. We went up to a presentation in Tampa at our school board meeting, and there was something essentially on retention for school board members, and it was by Principal Adam Lane out of Haines City. I'm sure Mr. Dodig's probably sick of hearing this name. I'm sorry.
That's all good.
But he's what he's doing is rock star. He high school principal there up in it's out of Polk County, excuse me, and he had an issue when he came in with retention, and there were a ton of openings and things looked very dire for him. And over the last 7 years, he's had literally no open spots, and we're asking him, hey, how is this going? And he went through it. A lot of it, again, was culture, which is a big thing we're focusing on here. And one of those things was he worked on recruiting. One of the methods of recruiting was he went to his high school students, his seniors, and he had them either intern in certain positions, either, within, some of the staff positions or kind of fall around the teachers. And what he told the students, the high school students, the seniors, was, hey, if you go and get, your teaching degree, you got a job when you come back. And what happened with that is he kept having people come back and they would tell others, and they would tell others, or even in his administrative office for that. That was a big thing. He used different strategies, even to keep up, how should I say, culture from having kind of like a pseudo store for students and teachers, and if they earned stuff, they could use these, I forget what their mascot was, whatever it was, Tiger Bucks or something like that. They could exchange it in, then they would get certain things for it. And they did a lot of recruitment, even just through people that were there coming like, hey, come over here. Look him up if you can on, I think there was something on Yahoo about him, Adam Lane, but he really, as I said, and he kind of went through some of his metrics too of how he did that, but it was just one of those, really talk about a culture turnaround that really, I mean, at least on me watching it, I say this, it's like a good coach, you want to run through a wall for him. And that's what it felt like. And he kind of backed up both his personality with his metrics and how he figured that out, so.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Anybody else have questions
Sure.
or comments for Rob?
Yeah, just, and I don't know if we have this, but I mean, these are good metrics, but they're kind of, when I look at them, it's like, this is after the fact, like, there's not much we do. Do you have anything like on leading indicators? Maybe is that something we've looked at before, like, hey, here are things we've noticed or trends we've noticed among terminations, like in the 6 months leading up to that?
No, I think that goes back to the exit interview. So let me tell you a little bit about our exit interview process. Our exit interview process is twofold. One is the exiting employee is asked they're sent a link, obviously to their personal email address because they no longer work for the district, to fill out essentially a questionnaire, which doesn't ask for a lot of information, just who they are, where they're at, or where their location was, and why they're leaving. And most people will either say personal or leaving for a different job, frankly. It doesn't give us much information. The other part of it is the supervising employee, is also asked to fill out an exit interview. So a principal or whomever, director of transportation, whatever, is asked to fill one out. And similarly, the data that's put in there, although we ask for more, principals or the supervisors also don't necessarily share maybe exactly why the person's leaving, because the person has only said to them, I'm leaving for personal reasons. Now, we don't know, and this is where I want to get to the core of exit interviews. Can we get more detailed information? Is someone leaving because they're moving out of state to take care of a sick family member? Well, in that circumstance, they're probably not retainable. But are they leaving because of the culture of the school or the workplace? And will they be honest with us about that? The problem in our system is we're asking the person that supervised them, that may have created the poor culture, to also fill one out. And how truthful or how honest is that person going to be, because it's going to reflect on them. So this is and if you do a lot of reading in human resources area, this is a very difficult area to try to figure out why people leave jobs. I kind of like it because it's psychosocial, and I'm kind of like that as an attorney, so I kind of enjoy delving into this. So I, fortunately, am hiring 2 new coordinators, one of whom is going to work on this for me, because we have to figure out a better way to get exit interview data that can be used, like you say, for what we think might happen in the future. So, yes.
What about anonymous surveys? There's tons of companies that do them.
We do them here. We actually do climate surveys every year of support staff and the instructional staff. And that information is then provided to all of those directors and principals. And people are very honest on them, and they're anonymous. But I can't tell you that human resources has the ability to follow through on all of that information. That's up to the folks that supervise the principals and others. And so that's a detachment in a huge organization, because obviously if there's climate surveys from a certain school and a principal, these things are being said, that person who supervises that principal, which is an executive director in academic services, deals with that. So that's how those climate surveys are essentially used
There's an opportunity.
historically. Absolutely, there's an opportunity there.
Rob, you
Yeah.
mentioned using the possibility of using a third party to handle the guest teachers.
Guest teachers, correct.
So this might be another area where you could explore using a third party to do exit interviews.
So Mr. Fisher's sitting next to you, so talk to him about budgeting. No. I hear you, Michelle, yeah.
Retention is such a big issue, then this data would be
It is a
extremely
huge
critical,
issue.
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I can tell you, so I work with a company that does a lot of adult education, and a lot of the companies we work with, the reason they bring us in is they're having retention problems.
Yes,
And one of the biggest pieces of feedback they get, or I think when they do these exit surveys, they find 70% of their employees or something like that are leaving because they just don't feel like the company's invested in their growth.
Supporting them,
So like,
yeah.
what's next for me?
Yes.
Like, they kind of get in this job and
Yes.
day to day, this is great,
yes.
but then at a certain point, it's like, what's next?
Yes.
And maybe there's an opportunity.
I'll give you a great example of that. Our support staff union has a program through the Florida Education Association and the National Education Association where they can get a 4-year degree paid for by the union. Those folks that belong to the union, as long as they continue to work for the district and the union. And it's virtual, granted, but that could lead them to become a teacher. Well, we have not done enough to talk about that program. I mean, that's a perfect opportunity. We don't provide it, the district's not paying for it, the union is. So that's a perfect example, and I've had my recruiting department have several meetings with the union, and how can we help you promote this program? But frankly, we need to do more in that respect. So people, a paraprofessional today can in a few years be a teacher. I mean, that's a way to retain people. There has to be, and I totally agree with you, that's one of the things, if you read in this industry, people have to know there's a way to move up. There has to be, because if you get some 25-year-old person, they want to know, in 10 years, can I still be here, but at a different job? I have a great example, is my administrative assistant went to college at FSW while raising 3 children. She's a Mariner High School graduate. She has received her bachelor's degree, and she is being promoted to a coordinator position in my division on Tuesday. Now, that's a great story. That's someone that has been a principal secretary, my administrative assistant, and is now working her way up to be a coordinator. That's what we need to cultivate. Yeah. So,
If I may just add one thing, I just want to validate the question that I heard come through is also, or their leading indicators, not just
Right,
waiting until the
yes.
employees left. And what I heard on their response was, we have an annual climate survey, but, again, is there more that can be done in that space other than just, a yearly insight, which doesn't sound like there's a linked system that responds to that data in a way that you can report on.
Right.
Is there a way to capture more information about the employee during the life cycle that they have,
Yeah.
other than when they leave us?
There
So
is.
we know if there is are they experiencing a lack of purpose? Are they experiencing a lack of feeling supported and grown in that way? What is the opportunity to respond to the culture throughout the year as opposed to annually when we get that information?
Yep.
I mean, so I heard that in your questions. I just wanted to kind of validate what I had kind of heard as a frontline
right.
manager and what I'd heard through the lines up to that.
thank you.
Well, and finding out why,
Yes.
I'm talking about exit interviews,
Yes.
accurate data. To me, it would seem that it's difficult to come up with strategies to address the KPI metrics if you don't know why
Why.
something happened,
That's
right?
right.
So it makes sense to start, in my opinion, it makes sense to start looking into getting
Why.
more data.
Yeah,
Can I just ask on that, because perfect segue, on that, the metrics, the KPI that are online,
yeah,
there's a huge, on the annual separations,
yes.
there's a huge end of the year June separation. It's the end of the school year.
May, May,
Yeah,
June,
these are
yeah.
listed as June, but is that
Right.
they just, year ends, they just don't return, there's no real separation, they just don't come back, what happens there? Can you kind of explain that
So
a
this
little
time
bit?
of year, we send out an optional survey, if you will. It's basically asking, it's an intent letter. What is your intent for next school year? This is to instructional personnel. And hopefully they're honest and they fill that out and they tell us. So in some respects, we would know that folks are leaving. But what you see there in June is because that's when the board meeting happens to approve all of the people coming in and the people going out. So June is, yes, the busy time of year for teachers to either be hired or leave. So, but typically we know when people, but there are circumstances when people just during the summer say, I'm not coming back.
Gotcha.
Believe it or not, there's times when a teacher will not even contact a school and they don't show up the first day of school. I mean, it happens, and very rarely, but that does happen. So, yeah.
Is there follow-up on those surveys that go out? I say I'm not returning, what happens next? You guys mentioned the climate survey, but what's the follow-up if I say I'm not returning? Are we gonna try to re-recruit them right on site and sort of talk through, sort of a mini state review of why
I think, and
they're-
Ken can maybe talk more to that as a former principal. I can tell you in human resources, that is in some ways left up to the site-based manager. Like, I'm not gonna know tomorrow that a teacher said to a principal, they're not coming back. With 6,000 teachers, that's just impossible to manage. But if a principal were to call me and say, hey, Rob, I need some strategies, help me out, what can I do to try to keep this person? The first thing I would say is the person inclined to want to stay in the district. Because I don't favor one school over another. I just want people to stay in the district, frankly. And Ken is right. You see a lot of movement that time of year from, Cape Coral, almost all of our schools are 100% staffed. So people want to work where they live. That's the largest community in our county. So, but I was with schools yesterday in the East Zone, they have 12 and 13 openings. So, versus 0 in the West Zone. And I know I'm not answering that specific question, but did you want to talk about it?
Well, I would just say these challenges are very nuanced. And so I would say for me, the more complicated the issue is, it's so important to have insights about all the different aspects that really drive our current situation. So while we look at these metrics and we see these high level numbers, there's so many opportunities for stories within stories. There's so many more opportunities of stories within not just the annual numbers and even the month by month numbers, but really unpacking that data and looking for leading data indicators that really start to give us, we want to be able to predict a person leaving before they leave. We want to try to head it off. We want to start looking at what are other correlating variables that we know are a higher probability this person may leave the organization, and we're just currently not there. And I think that's something that, like, what I appreciate, one of the things about many things I appreciate about our superintendent, about Rob and others is we can't sit here and say and take a victory lap. Right now, that earlier number that you saw, the vast difference, we still have 18 or 19 pages of vacancies today. And this isn't the beginning of the school year. This is well into the school year, right before we do high stakes testing, which is going to assess the entire system. I can tell you that as a school-based principal, the number one issues that we had in terms of low student achievement or low growth was a vacant classroom, where there was a substitute or people having to teach out of field. Those are challenges that result in genuine issues for our children that are significant. So sometimes it's looking at through a traditional lens, and many times it's really trying to understand a very complicated question in different ways, so you can gain different insights into organizationally what you can do other than some of our traditional solutions. So I try to address a little piece of it from the leadership lens as well.
Go ahead, Mike.
You kind of threw me off when you said that about Cape Coral. So is this almost a tale of two cities then? So that means while these overall district metrics look kind of bad, you're telling me maybe half the district actually looks great and the other half looks really, really, really bad.
They could look better. There's not 100% fill in Cape Coral. There's openings there.
I think there's a disparity by zone.
Yeah, there is.
I'm wrong.
Yeah, there is, frankly. There is. That's just the reality. So that's a way to attack it. What this group could help me with, though, and I think you've already helped me tonight, is with strategizing, I don't want to say the new strategic plan, but a modified strategic plan that is what I would consider up to date. I think Dr. Savage hit on something where I think some of these metrics are kind of old HR metrics that we've always used, and I'm not sure it's very helpful to my team to try to use these to compare how we're doing. I'm not saying we should modify them to make it look like we're doing better, but I think they need to be modernized because of the current marketplace and workplace. I don't think they work for me, and it's not because I didn't help develop them. It's just, there's other ways of measuring human resources and the way we're doing business, I think. And we need to modernize that. So this group can certainly help me. You've already helped me with a lot of your questions tonight. So regarding the Tale of Two Cities, I'm not here to really get into that tonight.
I
But
do have another
yeah.
question, if you want me to take you on a different.
But I need to say this first, Michelle, and I would be
remiss if I didn't say this.
I think outside of this presentation are a lot of things going on in public education. And I will just leave it at that. I mean, there's a lot of things going on in public education.
So that was a good segue to
Yeah.
my next question. I wondered when we looked at that 29% for the turnover for school personnel,
Yep.
how that number compares to similar sized districts in the state of Florida.
Yeah,
Do you
and
know that?
We do, and I don't have it here in front of me, but we do. In fact, I had some similarities, some comparisons in this presentation, and we took out a few of them.
As I was wondering
Yeah.
about that, I was thinking that would help determine, is this a problem that is within this district or is it a statewide problem?
Now, I can tell you it's
Yeah.
nationwide. I mean, is it this high? Maybe not necessarily,
Yeah, that's the
but
number I was looking for.
But I mean, teacher shortages are all over other than
Right.
Northeast and places where teachers make $100,000 a year.
But I'll take exception to that statement, because there's gotta be some out there that are hitting home runs. And if
Yeah.
we just use that as a rationale, you're never gonna fix this
Yeah.
number. Not trying to be harsh, it's reality. We gotta find the secret bullet that these other people are successful.
In Florida?
I don't care, Mexico.
No, that's fine. If we're talking in Florida, I'm not certain I would agree with you in Florida, but that's okay.
You know what, if I talk to an HR guy in New York, they're gonna tell me the same stuff. Every HR guy has a little tunnel vision that he's, woe is me, and they can't get it done because I'm in this situation. Yet, when you bring in the right person from the right area with the right experience, it's amazing how it turns around.
Well,
Done it for 35 years, seen it, we built a hub. Have you ever been to Philadelphia?
of course.
Okay, when you
I
land.
hate the Eagles.
You see the million square foot building there, right? UPS.
Yeah.
18 jumbo aircraft out there. 10,000 people work there. That was my building. They sent me up from Atlanta to take that building on. We could not staff that building. We were 300 to 500 people short every night. You do a 3 o'clock in the morning launch around the world, you can't launch if you're not closed, if the packages are still in the building. So we had to think outside the box how we're gonna fix this.
Yeah.
And we did a whole bunch of things. I'm not gonna bore you with all the details. With the help of the mayor, we put a whole process together. Buses with SEPTA, you name it.
Yeah.
Recruiting that we did with the university's tuition reimbursement.
Yeah.
And guess what? In 3 years, the thing was running like a Swiss watch. But if we have the mindset that, oh, we're in Philadelphia and nobody wants to travel out to the Hog Island Road from Northeast Philly to work, that's never gonna work.
I'm with you.
You gotta change
Yeah.
the mindset.
No doubt about it. Yeah, I'm with you.
Dr. Short, I want to give a local example that is also personally just on what Bill had just said, right? So I was at James Stevens, a school in our district, the 5th principal in 4 years. They had, the year before I got there, they had 10 vacancies mid-year. And it's a small elementary school, so you're talking, that's huge for a small school to have 10 vacancies mid-year. But by that same time, the next year, we had 0 vacancies. At the start of the school year, we had 0 vacancies. You know, it was about coming into the situation with a different mindset. I remember when I first started there, when I put a posting, there were 0 applicants. No one was applying to come work there. Similar to what we're seeing, where you post a job, it wasn't there. So what I started doing, calling the people. I started asking teachers to call their friends. When I would talk to these people in recruitment fairs, I would tell them, listen, I only take the best of the best. The people who come to this school, I'm not interested in someone who's, I want someone who is already the best or wants to become the best. And what was amazing was people started, who I was turning down for their jobs, were calling me to try to get a job there later on because of that different paradigm. So I just want to validate that, you know, it is part of the challenge we have with these really difficult problems is that it really requires us to think differently and more creatively in order to tackle these things. So I just really appreciate it. I want to use an example that was from not just our state, but from our own district. And, you know, we went from an F school to a B school, we went from the second lowest gains in the entire district to the second highest in the entire state. So that was something that was only because we had high qualified people do it here in Lee County, and it just validates what you're saying, different thinking, different results, and yeah, I'm very proud of that work, and so I just really appreciate your example, UPS, but I wanted to give you a school example right here that I can speak to. So I'm gonna get off my soapbox, because I'm done, but I really appreciated your example, Bill, and I had to validate that on my side too.
Thank you.
One question, it's probably might be even a question for Mr. Fisher, if you know, I know this is your first year, so you may not yet, but Rob or Ken might be able to also help me. I'm wondering too, is there a point during the year where, like you mentioned that you're just giving this presentation to the board, but is there a point during the year where you share with the board the specific strategies that you're using to try and achieve the metrics on the KPIs, or?
There hasn't been, not since I've been back here. I came in 21, like I said.
Right, yeah.
Typically, there's a presentation in October after the beginning of the school year with a lot of this data. This went so late this year because of the hurricane.
Right.
So, but as far as, and Ken can help me maybe, I think there's a presentation relative to the strategic plan. I think that's what you're talking about.
I'm
So-
actually talking about the very
I remember Angela doing it. Yeah.
activities that, for example, this one KPI, decreased turnover for school personnel, the target was 19%. So I was just wondering, is there any kind of presentation where that particular department would come to the board and say, okay, our target is 19% this year, these are the strategies that we've come up with to try and achieve this target?
Yeah.
You know, just so everybody's aware, this is what you're doing.
Yeah, yeah, no, I understand, yeah. Like I said, I don't have a retention department, so that's, yeah, but that may be something we need. I mean, thinking outside the box. I think that would be fabulous if I could have a whole department that strategizes and then comes up with ideas on how to retain teachers. That's reality right now, so. But I agree with the UPS example. I totally agree with the UPS example.
So along those lines, actually, this committee last year talked about the issue of recruiting people in this area for lack of affordable housing. That
Still a huge issue.
So one of the things that we all talked about, was, I'm not sure if, I don't think any of you were on that.
I was here.
You were here?
Yep.
So one of the things that we talked about was utilizing land that belongs to the district that's not large enough for specific school types.
Yeah.
And building affordable housing for teachers, first responders, to attract them to this area and retain them. Because it's more expensive to rent down here than to own. So that was something that we did talk about last year.
Correct. I think that's something that is something that you guys follow up on, correct, Sam?
Me, from my personal standpoint, at least, I'm not speaking for the whole board, that is something that has been discussed. I know, well, even the hospital board, I know they've, as I said, I don't wanna, go into too much with it right now, but yeah, no, that's something that I know I've personally asked about, and something that, is possible consideration, so. But it's a good idea.
So I have a little bit of information on that too. The county as a whole, because again, attainable housing isn't just impacting us, it's impacting the entire county. And the availability of workers and being able to recruit and have folks get to where they go and not contribute to the traffic issues that we experience. And so the entire county is actually looking at this information, and a lot of the businesses. So essentially there are different bodies that have addressed this and are looking into it. And this is one of their top issues related to that body of work as well. So like Horizon Council is a good example. That's through economic development for the county. They're actually looking at this in all the industries and how it impacts them. So it's another body of work that it's not just us alone. There's a lot of other people doing it too.
Follow up on that. Yeah, there's a countywide, I believe it's Attainable Housing Board that is working on that from different, just kind of what Dr. Savage was talking about in regards to some of that. So kind of a push of that, looking, if it's county and business officials and all over. So there's considerations of, public-private partnerships and those kind of things in regards to that. And I'll also tell you, our Senate President Kathleen Pasadoma, that is one of her big things that she is trying to work on during this legislative session. So that's something she did talk to us about.
Yeah, that's her number one issue.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
That should help.
It would help greatly, I believe. Yep. Anything else?
Anybody else have any final questions or, so thank you so much, Rob, for
You're
your.
welcome.
And I feel like we
At
really,
any time.
we really hit
I,
more questions tonight.
No, you
That
guys are
was helpful
great.
for us,
You
I
guys are
think.
great. It's, any help and any contribution you guys can make is very much appreciated. So you all bring different perspectives that I am appreciative of. So, thank you.
So the next thing we have on our agenda, and we're staying right on time, is the board member report from Mr. Sam Fisher.
Thank you, Chair Stork. I appreciate it. Again, I'm Sam Fisher. I'm a District 1 board member, which encompasses most of Cape Coral. So I have some insight into that as well. I've been on the job. I'm about to hit 90 days, I think. I'm pretty close to that. So thank you all for having me. I've enjoyed this. I'm trying my best to listen and go through things and kind of be able to take some stuff to the board. So one of the things that, I've kind of hearing about is obviously, the data and, what we're trying to do about it. And one of the big things is obviously figuring out what, like Dr. Savage said, what are these variables, what are causing it? A big part of this, and at least for me personally, I know the administration and the board as well, part of our thing is looking at culture. It has been really, really something that we've continually talked about each meeting. And one of those things is listening and listening up and not getting to the point where we're having to talk about terminations, but to, like you guys have talked about leading indicators and trying to figure out why people want to leave. So, and one of the things that I really have to commend Dr. Bernier and his staff is really going out and listening to people right now. And that's something I'm doing myself, is really part of that culture change, listening, going around. I was at a school today, in fact. I'm going around to all the schools in my district and, just going and talking to the principals and teachers and staff and just kind of getting that feedback. And it's not gonna happen in one session, but you wanna build up that trust so that they can tell you stuff and, hey, what's going on? Because there's things that, one of the things that I believe Mr. Dode had brought up was, one thing I didn't realize was even with teachers was the childcare part with that. I mean, having that covered and those kind of things. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different reasons that, money is obviously a big one, housing, just different things. And I commend Dr. Savage as well, as I guess he is our own kind of Adam Lane here. So, and appreciate what he did with that. But one of the things we can do, going back to what Mr. Ripple talked about, is we have some even in this district, some schools that are really successful with that. And I went to a middle school last week in Cape Coral, and the culture and the things they do, I'm always the proponent, let's take what others are doing and make it our own, don't reinvent the wheel. And this person had just found out that they were losing a science teacher, and they already had someone within that staff that could fill it immediately. They had that kind of leadership. They already identified different leaders throughout the schools that are going to be eventually APs, assistant principals, not even at their school, but are part of that pool. They're really trying to work and listen to their teachers, and as I said, there's things, that they're doing very well with things, and we need to kind of emulate that from, and that's what reminded me when Dr. Savage said that. So, but yeah, really listening, and that's, I know that seems simplistic, but right now, I really, whether it's email or whatever, and Dr. Bernier is going out to a lot of different schools, a lot of different people, and listening, and we want to get that feedback to see if we can explain that data and then see what these variables are. So please, as I said, outside of this, feel free to reach out to me. As I said, I have a lot to learn, and I'm listening. I want to see what these changes are. So, because, as I said, it's I know it's been tough for this district, and I want to make sure we're keeping those people, because like Dr. Savage and Mr. Dodick said, retention, culture right now, we're really trying to, said culture, as best we can throughout the district, that every school has that culture. So, but thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Mr. Fisher?
I guess I got off easy.
I have a comment for Mr. Fisher. I just have to
Okay.
say, thank you so much for bringing up the board piece. We had a recent board meeting that about a listen up culture. And, I just could not agree more from my professional experience in this district for almost 20 years now as an administrator. Culture is everything. When you walk into school, you can feel it. You can feel it from the kids, from the adults. Culture is the most singular defining thing of when you walk into a successful place. And it really begins with leadership, and that means two-way. It's not leadership in the positional thing. It's really about how the people feel invested. The kids feel like it's their school. The parents feel like they are heard and involved. The teachers and staff members feel that way. And so it was such a wonderful moment for me when I sat in the board meeting and I heard this repetition of the word culture, 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 and how important it is. And so I think what I heard tonight with the committee, it just aligns right with what Mr. Fisher was saying, was that do we have enough information that really speaks to that activity of the culture within the building throughout the year? Not waiting until we lose people, not waiting until we see the autopsy data. That's why I like to call data that you can't do anything with. It's too little, too late. There's a lot of opportunity for leading indicators, which I heard as a suggestion about information that you didn't see. Now, I don't want to put you on the spot, but this was that strategic plan update. This is the HR update to address the strategic plan. Every division has one. Now, the prior versions were like 50 plus slides. Dr. Bernier, one of his leadership approaches is more concise, wants fewer slides, 8 to 10 slides, pick the ones that are the most important. People can look at the rest as backup material, things along those lines. But that's just, this was that actual presentation. If you were to see it a couple years ago, it was 50 plus slides, all metrics. It had the target lines, just the kinds of things you were referring to. What he kind of felt was, let's not inundate people with the data. Let's pick the pieces of data that we think are the most important for that, and then let's talk about those problems. So I just wanted to highlight that because I don't think Rob was quite clear about that, but that's what, as someone who's been here for multiple years, that was really what happened. And that was supposed to be an October presentation. It was delivered most recently because Hurricane Ian, it got kicked back. It was also revised numerous times. So I wanted to give you that understanding too for your request, because I wanted to answer that question too. But Mr. Fisher, just thank you for everything that you and the board have done and for sharing that extra feedback that didn't make it into our notes about the listen up culture.
So I appreciate that information, Dr. Savage. I think we have on our schedule for next month, and then I'll get to the next thing on the agenda, but since we're talking about this, I'll just address it. The academic achievement with a specific focus on students who speak English as a second language. And so, since you're right, we did not let Rob know, Mr. Dodig know ahead of time that it would be good to see the target in the strategic plan and then where we actually are. Perhaps in that presentation, they could include not all the historic data, but just the target for 22 and then where we ended up in 22, because I think that information is valuable for the committee because it helps us ask questions. So the next thing on the agenda is to the consideration of our recommendations to the board or future topics. We only have after tonight a March and April meeting, and our March meeting is going to include the academic achievement presentation that the committee decided that was the second priority we wanted to focus on. My idea, and I wanted to bring it up for discussion, is that we wait until our April meeting to craft recommendations, if we have any, to the board so that we have an opportunity to kind of think about the data that we've been presented with. And maybe if we have additional questions, we can ask Dr. Savage to bring us that additional information before we make any recommendations to the board in April. How do y'all feel about that?
I don't know what alternative we have.
Yeah.
So that's
Well, we have in the past made recommendations right after a presentation. And that's another way we could do it. If anybody had an idea for recommendations for the board after tonight's presentation, we could do it that way as well.
So if I hear you correctly, you're saying let's hear the next presentation and then present on both of those topics, or select a topic first?
No, my idea was that we hear both of our presentations, so tonight's and next month, and then in April, this committee has discussion about what recommendations we would like to make to the board based on those two priorities: academic achievement and workforce success. If you have a recommendation for the board after tonight's presentation, you're welcome to make a motion and we can have a second and discuss it.
I don't think I do at this point. Just trying to make sure I understood exactly what was the discussion.
I think that makes sense, because then we'll have the extended time of April to kind of talk through what these different recommendations are, so.
Yeah, and I was thinking also if you have any questions or additional information you might like, you could reach out to Dr. Savage and he can help bring that to the committee. Okay, so that is what we will do. We will Missy will make notes for us, so in our minutes, we'll know that in our April meeting, we're gonna have a discussion about possible recommendations for the board based on the 2 priorities we heard this year, which are workforce success tonight, and then next month, academic achievement. And I don't think we have any public speakers, correct? Does anybody have anything for the good of the order? Okay, is there a motion to adjourn
Yes.
tonight?
I just want to support what you were just saying, just as an open invitation to the committee. I know that you have a presentation and you get, it's not a great deal of time and you have time for questioning and whatnot, but if there's information that would help you that is beyond it, like the deeper off the page type of information that you would really want, it is perfectly acceptable to request. And if there's something that's readily available, I can get it from our colleagues and send it to the entire committee so you can review it before you have the next meeting, so that when you do come, you could come in and make a motion because you've had a chance to have some discussion about something like that. So I'm happy to do that. I just want to offer that to you, so you don't feel like on the pressure to sit through a presentation and immediately feel like you have to make a recommendation. I think it's very wise to have the opportunity to really think about it and analyze the data. I mean, even something like today came up with the best practices. What are some of the best practices? What's a listing of some of those best practices? That's something that I can see if they have something that could be available, if they have it. Now, if they don't have it and it takes staff time to create something, that may be a little bit more challenging. But I just wanted to offer that piece of feedback based on the discussion I heard from today.
Great. Might have a couple of things for you.
Okay.
I was thinking the same thing. We just send you an email on that?
Yes, I mean, that's for the committee and for the chair, however, whatever process you want to go to. Obviously, whatever information I give to everyone, but if the request could come from someone, now, again, it goes back to if it's new work, if it's something that I don't have the authority to assign staff to do something, like if it's something they don't readily have, but if they have data that's readily available, then it takes a modest amount of time for you to put it together. It certainly would help the committee, and I'm happy to play that role.
And if we feel that we were missing some data because of that reason, it's just not readily available, we could include that in our recommendation too, based on the data that we're looking for, et cetera. Okay, anybody else have anything for the good of the order? Okay, so a motion to adjourn the meeting? Anybody? Thank you. So anybody second?
I'll second.
Oh,
Sorry.
The
Yes, another one, poor Misty, she's like, I gotta get to know all these people. All in favor of adjourning tonight's meeting? Yes, aye. Okay, thank you, everyone. We'll see you on March 14th.
And remember, if you haven't signed in, please sign in.
Okay.